And picking up where I left off last week, so let's see, we ended with the N. Let's add 2 and then 1, 2, 3 lines. Right, so I'm going to start with the pencil because it really does help to inform the structure of the letters. So this is the O. And notice I'm on the flat of the pencil. I'm not on a point. No pressure, pressure, pressure. And 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So I count because the counting helps to slow down the writing. I actually have this on my sheet at 2. And I have it a little bit more pointed at the base. There we go. The other O that I have on the page is this. And, you know, these look surprisingly like minuscule O's, which a lot of people tend to do this to. I don't do this. I do this, and I join in the middle third, so my ligature joins the next letter in a correct place rather than pushing it across in an odd sort of place. As I'm just running through the minuscule, sorry, the majuscules that I've found in these manuscripts, in these Writing Master copybooks, I'm just putting them as I have them. So you may see, well, you will see letters which you've seen before, but there are very, very slight variations. So this wasn't meant to be a ligature. It's just meant to sort of fill some space. Now, in my Copperplate script, I use my Angular Confinement system to hold everything in place. And everything tends to sit on the 55. So all these 3 strokes are on the 55. Whereas with this historical O, you have the 55 and you have another angle. So again, remember we looked at this B and how the historical my B sits within a parallelogram. And the historical B actually uses a series of other basic shapes like triangles. And we can see that happening here again. Now, the other thing about this O is some of the O's start here, some start here. So looking at the starting point is really key. In these variations, one O starts, that's the apex there, starts below the apex and comes up and back and around. And the other O starts just over the apex to give us a little loop. A variation on this is, notice where I call this a dollop finial. So this dollop finial points up and this one points across. They can also point, they can point in any number of directions. This one points this way. One of the other interesting features with these kinds of P's, and again, I go back to my angular confinement. With my angular confinement, I stay within the parallelogram, and my base shape is an ellipse. So I don't call these ovals, because you think of an oval, you have a tendency to think of an egg, which is pointed at the top and bigger at the bottom. So I call these oblate ellipses because they tend to be flatter on the sides than at the top. Historically, there is more of a circular shape embedded in this kind of elliptical construct. And even here, you can see that that's really more circular than elliptical. And I guess that's why people tend to refer to them as ovals, because of the historical context. Now, one of the other things that I noticed was some of the P's have a tendency to be higher, and they point down as opposed to having a dollop finial. And with this shape, so there are lots of variations of this shape which can be misconstrued as either a T or an I or possibly a J. So it really does depend on context. This lead-in stroke varies so much. So in my version of this, if I'm doing an I go up and over and down and back and under. This tends to be on the 55. These tend to lean a little bit more. But this top lead-in stroke has a tendency to vary from this angle to a horizontal angle to an upward angle. So it gives you so much more scope for play. And some of the finials, some of the terminal finials, the terminal dollop shapes tend to go out and up and back on themselves. So they fill in because of how the ink pulls back onto itself. But the location of this, so this is pointing upward at an angle, and this is not pointing straight across. It's actually, if you look at the direction, it's aiming for a spiral. So notice I've turned the pen. And these V's are really quite fascinating because they are not on the 55. So I find this really quite odd, and a lot of them vary from this angle through to a much more vertical angle. So I'm not going to do the lead-in horizontal wave stroke. And so this is the 55. This is a completely different angle. I mean, this is almost, I would say that's about 80 degrees, possibly 75. And this comes down and up and out. So this doesn't necessarily connect with another letter. It's just an additional bit of decoration. I go up, down, back. And this is something I found really fascinating with the X's in this in this study that I'm doing. I make an X like this, and I put weight on the second stroke. Simply because too much ink there causes the paper to destabilize. But they do this amazing sort of weight in the middle, and they come back and they put weight at the top and release the weight from there. And it gives the X a very different shape, so you really have to sort of control it. So there's one of these Z's again. Now, again, with this Z, the image that I have on my sheet is actually, so I'm setting up the Z because I have to sort of rotate back through it. So I've rotated enough so that I have the space to rotate back through it. So you see that rotation so look at where the nib is facing, and I come around, and as I get to the bottom, I turn and turn and turn, so I have the ability to press, because of course if you're facing this direction, you can't press in the direction of the 55. You have, the tines must face, the underside of the tines must face the direction of the 55. Come back around, roll back, so you go, 1, 2, 3, 4, press, 2, 3, 4, roll, 2, 3, 4, little press, 2, 3, 4, roll, 2, 3, 4, roll, 2, 3, 4, press, 2, 3, 4, up, 2, 3, 4. So there's quite a lot of tool manipulation going on here. And there's another O. This is great. This is a lovely O. Down and up and over and back and out. That's rather messy. Let me just fix that. And there's this really lovely M. Oh, this is so beautiful. Oh, too big, too wide. So again here, you'd really need to be careful with these internal spaces. So let's look at trying to do that one more time. So I'm sort of setting up the space for myself here. Keep it narrow. Keep it narrow. And keep it narrow. I personally feel that it looks better with a pencil than with this with the nib. And you really see that difference. So training with a pencil really does help. So I hope that's given you a little bit more insight into some of the historical English roundhand letter forms that I'm doing some research in.